When you saw Federer, Novak, or Nadal in your quarter, I was like, how do you want to go home, basically? That's how good they were.
Everywhere you look, people are asking the same question. Is this finally the new era? Is Novak Djokovic finished at the top? And while fans argue online, one player keeps saying the quiet part out loud. Nick Kyrgios. Love him or hate him, Kyrgios has never been afraid to tell the truth, especially when it comes to Novak Djokovic. And when Nick talks about greatness, pressure, and mental strength, people listen. Because according to Kyrgios, no matter how exciting Alcaraz and Sinner are, they still can't touch Novak Djokovic.
You know, when I played Grand Slams and I was in my prime, you know, I would make the fourth round or fourth round, and I knew that that was probably as far as I was going to go. You know, you obviously had the big three: prime Murray, prime Wawrinka, prime Del Potro, prime Cilic, all the big servers, prime Isner, Berdych, Monfils, and then, you know, I was looking at the draw and I was like, and then me, and I was like, I'm probably not going to advance. I think now the slams are more open because what are the chances that someone like me or someone like Songa was ever going to beat Rafa, and then the next day you had to maybe play Novak, and then the next day you had to play Fed. Like, the chances of beating those guys multiple times in a slam was basically zero.
There is something Nick Kyrgios has said that perfectly sums up the difference between tennis then and now. According to Kyrgios, playing on today's tour is easier than playing during the era of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. Not because today's players lack talent, but because the level of difficulty back then was unreal. When Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic were all in their prime, there was no escape. Every major tournament had the same ending. If you wanted to win a Grand Slam, you had to beat at least one of them, and most of the time, two. Sometimes all three. Kyrgios has pointed out that it didn't matter how well you were playing. Your path was blocked by legends. Back then, the top of the sport was closed. There were no soft draws, no lucky runs. If you weren't ready to play 5 hours of perfect tennis, you were gone. That's why Kyrgios says today's era feels different. More open, more forgiving.
Well, I think now you know, if Sinner, Alcaraz, or like one of those guys has one bad day, the draw is like, that section is wide open for everyone. I just think, yeah, like I would love to have played during this era, like of my prime, for sure. I think I would have been making fourth round or quarters pretty easy, to be honest. When you saw Federer, Novak, or Nadal in your quarter, it was or like third or fourth round, I was like, how do you want to go home, basically? That's how good they were.
And here is the crazy part. Legendary coach Patrick Mouratoglou agrees with Kyrgios. In fact, he goes even further. According to Mouratoglou, the reason today's era feels more open is simple. The game no longer has to deal with three all-time greats at the same time. Mouratoglou explains that when those three were active together, the ceiling of tennis was pushed to an almost impossible level. You didn't need to play great, you needed to play perfect. Every round mattered, every mistake was punished, there were no breaks. And at the center of that era, Mouratoglou points to Novak Djokovic. He believes Djokovic is the most complete player the sport has ever seen.
At the moment, clearly there is Carlos, Yannick above everybody. Just look at the results. Not only the way they play tennis, but the way they play and the domination they have within the whole crowd of all the other players. Then you have Novak alone there. He doesn't have the level in this past year to beat them. At the same time, you see that Carlos and Yannick keep progressing all the time. Look at the progress of Carlos between Wimbledon and the US Open, and listen to what Yannick says right after his final. He's already thinking about solutions to beat Carlos next time and where he needs to progress. 2 years ago, Novak is on the top of the world. Of course, he's the greatest of all time, and then it will remain until maybe one day someone proves him wrong. But he was the best player in the world by far. It happened even in a few months, because from there, being on the top of the world, a few months later, he starts to lose against those two guys, Yannick and Carlos. And now what is he saying? He's saying, my body is not strong enough to fight those two guys in Grand Slams in 5 sets.
They're just too good, you know, playing on a really high level. Yeah, best of 5 makes it very, very difficult for me to play them, particularly if it's like the end stages of the Grand Slam. You know, I can do only as much as I can do, and yeah, it will be very difficult for me in the future to overcome the hurdle of Sinner, Alcaraz in the best of 5 on the Grand Slams.
And we've seen it, half injured, maybe in Roland Garros, Wimbledon, half injured or injured, and then he feels very tired after only 2 sets against Carlos at the US Open. He's coming from my body's perfect to my body's weak compared to those two guys because of the age.
And then Andy Roddick adds another layer to the debate. Unlike hot takes and social media hype, Roddick approaches the conversation with caution. He's openly said that he doesn't know if Carlos Alcaraz will ever surpass Novak Djokovic, and not because of talent. Roddick has been very clear. Alcaraz is special, explosive, fearless, capable of doing things on a tennis court that almost no one else can. But according to Roddick, greatness isn't measured by highlights, it's measured by longevity. Roddick often reminds people what Djokovic's career actually looks like, year after year at the top, across different generations, against different styles. Djokovic didn't just win big tournaments. He stayed there. And Roddick questions whether anyone, including Alcaraz, can maintain that level for 15 years. Because talent gets you in the door. Sustainability keeps you in history.
People come up to me and be like, can Yannick and Carlos get to 20? And I'm like, that's just an absurd conversation to be having now. Like, they're good. They're ball for ball. They're like the big three, the way they play. But to do it for 20 years, that's so hard. Novak was basically like, these guys, it's very clear that this is going to be really hard for me to beat these guys in a longer format. He's like, they're better, right? And that can't be easy for someone to say who's as good as he is and, is never, and it's counter. Like everyone, when he came into tennis, Roger and Rafa were better than everyone. And credit to him, he was the only guy that wasn't going to say it. And look at where, I knew who they were. I was trying to beat them, but I'm like, I kind of want to get one in. I kind of want to try to win one. And he's never said that about anyone. Maybe, I don't know, maybe keep going and I can sneak one. But on the day after day, week in, week out, they're better than I am. And listen, time is undefeated. Novak has given it hell. It's hard to kind of play part-time tennis, show up, and he makes the semis of the US Open when he kind of hasn't played. He played one tournament in May, one tournament in July, one tournament in September, 3 Grand Slam semifinals. I never made 3 Grand Slams. I was number one in the world. I never made 3 Grand Slam finals in a year. He did it in the last 3 months. It's absurd what he's done.
So when you listen to Nick Kyrgios, Patrick Mouratoglou, and Andy Roddick, one thing becomes clear. This isn't about disrespecting the new generation. Carlos Alcaraz is phenomenal. The future of tennis is bright. But what Novak Djokovic has done is different. He didn't dominate a gap. He didn't benefit from transition years. He survived the hardest era tennis has ever seen and still came out on top. That's why even players and coaches who competed against him hesitate to say anyone will surpass him. Because talent is common, greatness is rare, and sustaining greatness over decades, that's legendary. The debate will continue. New stars will rise. But until someone proves they can do it year after year, under pressure, against everyone, Novak Djokovic remains the standard, and maybe the greatest we'll ever see.